The School of Shamanism, Master Tatankananda, returning to the earth a person at a time. Time film is a receptor of energetic impulse. Time film is that which receives the energetic flashes. Think back with me for just a moment of where, if this happened to you, where were you when you had your first kiss with the person that you now are in love with? Where was the first time that you had that romantic moment where you knew you were going to stay with this person? If it was up to you, you were going to stay with them the rest of your life. Where were you? Well, most people can easily remember where they were, and sometimes make pilgrimages back to that place where they had that initial emotional outburst of love and affection. Why does that place feel different than a roller coaster? Well, for some it may have been on a roller coaster, but why does that special place feel different to you than it does to anybody else? If you walk into a place where there's been a heinous crime, a murder, or some other heinous crime, why do we feel antsy about that? Why do we not want to go in to an abandoned insane asylum or go into an abandoned concentration camp? Why do we find ourselves frightened when we go into places where violent acts occurred? It's because the time film receives all that energetic impulse, and it's forever. The first time that I ever ran into the time film, and it took me all these years to figure out what happened to me, is I was in a submarine. I was in a submarine that was docked in Galveston Island called Seawolf. I was in that submarine. I was in the forward torpedo room. And during the tour, I had lagged behind, and so I was in the torpedo room by myself. In a flash, I suddenly saw the four men in the forward torpedo room. All the noises were happening that you would hear when a submarine was on high alert. And they had the tubes open and were shoving torpedoes into the tubes. I could smell their sweat. I could see the fear on their faces. I could hear their movements of their feet upon the ground. I could see the look on their face of uncertainty. And just as quickly as that vision appeared, it disappeared. What happened then, as I stood there looking at that blank room, now having been unused for over 40 years? What was it that I just tapped into? I tapped into, for probably the first time, the time film. Because the time film surrounded the submarine and surrounded the forward torpedo room and surrounded each one of the sailors. And all the torpedoes, for that matter. There was time film around everything. But when they were on high alert and when they were going to attack, the emotion was so high, there was so much fear, there was so much uncertainty, there was so much anxiety, that it flashed from those four guys on the time film until the energy from the emotion was greater than the density of the time film. And when that happened, a life picture all of its own, a living picture lifted off the time film and was there for anyone to see who was sensitive to it. I didn't know I was sensitive to the time film. I didn't know, but now I do. And I had seen for the first time in my life what happens when you tap into the time film. You can see what happened in the past, not because of some psychic ability and not because of some mental ability, but because the time film itself will show itself once it's maxed out. Once the time film has been maxed out by exposures until the density of the time film has more energy on it than it can hold, then that memory becomes something that floats, if we want to put it this way, above the time film. Above the time film. And that's what I experienced. That's what we experience when we go back to where we had our first kiss, where we had our first hand-holding, where we had our first very positive emotion with another human being. That's why we can go back to places and feel what went on there. This is an emotion. The time film carries a record of emotional exposures. That's what the time film does. Energy energy flashes, emotional energy, mental energy flashes on the time film. Flashes. We do it all the time. But when it reaches a certain intensity that is repeated, I am certain that the fellows in that forward torpedo room, that wasn't the first time they had been frightened. I was sensing one time that was floating above the time film. I am certain that had happened again and again and again and again, thus making the density of the time film render up the excess energy, causing it to be a complete replica of what happened there. I think that one day we will get so skilled at reading the time film that criminals will not be able to get by with violent crimes, because the time film will pick it up, and people who are sensitive to the time film, and who knows, maybe we'll even create some kind of energetic receptive machine so that we can see exactly who's doing what within the time film itself. But energy, your energy, my energy, we always broadcast onto the time film. When the same emotion is repeatedly exposed on the time film, the same one over and over and over, or if it's an extremely powerful one, like that first kiss or that first handhold or that first feeling of love that carried you away off your feet, that time film records that so that you can always see it. You can always see it. It stays there forever, and it surrounds objects. It surrounds every object, including ourselves. So this is the whole energy theory of the time film. The time film is energetically receptive. Now, what does this have to do with the gods arising? Well, in the next podcast, I'm going to tell you exactly how that happens. How does that happen? How does the time film render up something that can be mistaken for a god? And then why do the gods persist? So listen to the next podcast and we'll hear for ourselves. This is Master Tatankananda. The School of Shamanism, Master Tatankananda, returning to the earth a person at a time.